So how do we go from burnout to brilliant?
When I see clients who are at that point where it's like, boom, I'm burnt out, and it creeps up on you, your body and your mind are whispering things to you all the time, and often we're too busy to notice. So once people get to that burnout point, they've hit that wall. I don't have any energy. I don't have any mental capacity. I've got no oomph left to pull myself out and go into the next direction. That first thing is that you need to stop. In 10, 20, 30 years, workplaces will be more psychologically safe and have more empathic leaders and have all these wonderful things that aren't happening now. But am I going to wait for another 10, 20, 30 years? Or am I going to take charge of my life now and start putting these things into my place as though they're as important as a meeting or a professional development thing that I've got to do? I need to do that. Right? We need to do it first, don't we? We can't wait for the world to be perfect because we'll be waiting a long time.
Dr. Marny, welcome to the Career Confidence Podcast. I am really excited to have this conversation with you today. I think it is very needed in our society right now. We're going to be talking about all things burnout, mental health, and all the things that I think people are really struggling with right now in our society. But before we get into our conversation, could you give the audience a little bit of an introduction into who you are, your background, and what brought you here today? So Marny, over to you.
Who am I? That's it. We're getting very philosophical straight away, aren't we?
Absolutely. Diving straight in.
Exactly. Well, I'm a health and community psychologist, and it's a really interesting term because I think when people think about what a psychologist does, I think you go straight to kind of sitting on a couch, don't you, talking about, your psychological issues or roadblocks in your life or things that you're going through that you need help navigating. And yes, I do all of those sorts of things. But as a health and community psychologist, I'm very, passionate about working with big groups and talking about prevention. So thinking about all those issues that people do go through, although whether they're kind of individual issues or whether they're kind of collective issues, things that are going globally, giving people the information they need as a group or preventatively, almost before they think they know they need it. So I have spent a lot of time in private practice over the years, so I do understand the lay of the land, but also what I do now is spend more of my time writing books and developing learning and development experiences for people in workplaces so that I can get them at the front end and also the back end as well.
I absolutely love that, because I think if I reflect personally on my own life, and I've seen a psychologist before, a lot of people wait for crisis or something to happen in their life for them to have the anxiety disorder, which what I had. Had I known the warning signs, the red flags that were happening, I would never have needed to probably go into a psychologist's chair and talk about all the things that are happening in my life. So can we first talk about your life and your career as a psychologist? Like, was there anything, if you reflect back, that you could pinpoint that were bringing people to you, like common themes, common patterns, common issues? Like, so I think when we sort of can identify patterns, we can start to learn more about the human mind and maybe what the real issue is at the moment.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting question because even now that I do more of the prevention work, I think I needed to work in private practice for many years to understand what those main themes are and what main issues are coming, because then that gives me the valuable, almost data to then create what is needed in the population in general in terms of prevention programs and presentations and things like that. So I would say today in 2024, what I'm seeing more of is, I guess, that chronic stress, anxiety, and burnout. So and then of course, if we don't manage any of those in the best way we possibly can, of course, what you're going to see is kind of that depression as a coexisting condition. So if we can't navigate being constantly stressed or constantly anxious or just burnt out and just so exhausted that you can't, just deal with anything anymore, because there's just almost nothing left. There's nothing left for you to kind of draw on. Then, of course, you're going to be heading onto that kind of depression pathway. So I think, yeah. And I think that's getting caused by not only our individual circumstances, but what's happening globally as well in terms of the crises that we're probably absorbing, and us not having the psychological capabilities to deal with these.
Yeah, I can relate to everything you just said then. And I think that when I reflect, because I can talk from my own experience here, but if I look back now on what caused my anxiety, it was focusing on what things I couldn't control. And I am a bit of can be a bit of a control freak in my life. And I was always then, once I couldn't control something, jumping to the worst case scenario and then focusing purely on that and being so transfixed on that. And then it was like I almost lost perspective of everything else in my life. And I was just solely focused on all the things I didn't want to have happen and all the things that I already had in my life at the time. And it was just then, and I've said this before in the podcast, it became a spiral of being anxious about being anxious, because the panic attacks became really severe that I was then worried about having another one, which then ironically would spark another one. So how can people, if they're in this sort of like anxiety loop, is, how can they start to untangle and unravel this and maybe start to get a bit more of awareness about what's actually going on inside of them?
Yeah, it's such a hard one, because I think, like what you're talking about in terms of your own experience, there's times where I felt like that as well. And I'm sure there's many listeners out there that are almost feeling that all the time, but just pushing on with it. So I think, and not realising that it doesn't have to be that way. And I think, when we're talking anxiety in particular, that is the most common chronic condition in the world. Wow. So you look at the data, anxiety is massive globally, but at the same time, we're almost wired as human beings. I mean, it served our ancestors well to have this fight or flight or freeze response. So it served our ancestors well. So our brain is supposed to do, like you said, like it might catastrophize, or all the things that we think are very unhelpful, it can cause us a lot of distress, actually served our ancestors well to get us, running up a tree or fighting that predator. But if we allow that to continue in our modern world, we're going to be distressed and we're not going to perform at our best. So it's almost like we have to have self-compassion right now if we're feeling like that, and don't shove it under the rug, and have that self-awareness to go, hey, look at my brain protecting me right now. Look at my awesome brain. Look what it's doing. But is it necessary for what I'm going through right now? And if it isn't, then what do I need to do to be able to control it? And then that's where you start thinking about, what are those kind of cognitive techniques that I can use to try and kind of challenge my brain, or learn to let go of those thoughts, or kind of untangle the unhelpful thinking that I might have. I might have some cognitive distortions that are, taking control of me. Or is it a matter of distraction and making sure that I put things into place in terms of my self-care? But I think that self-awareness is extremely important to kind of go, oh, look at that. Look what my brain's doing. Isn't that interesting? That is awesome. But, hey, I don't need to be protected right now. I'm going to take control of this.
Yeah, self-awareness is huge. And something that I worked a great deal on, becoming more self-aware of my thoughts, of my emotions, and what I was feeling from a moment-to-moment basis. But someone's listening to this right now and they want to develop more self-awareness. Any tips and advice for how they can go about doing that so they can become more aware of these thoughts and these patterns that they might not even realize they have?
Yeah. I often say this, and I think I actually said it in my book that I wrote recently, is that your body and your mind are whispering things to you all the time. There's always signs and signals, and often we're just not tuned in because we're so busy. And I think in today's world, we're probably busier than ever. And if you think of the profession, and I'm sure you've met and worked with many professionals, they're almost, the signs are there, but yeah, they've just brushed them off. They're just being too busy, and they wear multiple hats and they're in multiple roles. And, it's a very different world than it was, even 20, 30 years ago. And I think that first step is to kind of go, oh, look, am I not operating like I used to? Am I more fatigued than ever? Am I more irritated? Have I got less tolerance with my colleagues? Am I not sleeping very well? Am I constantly feeling panicky? Am I eating there's so many things that you're doing differently and almost outside of your awareness, that you're probably ignoring all the things that your brain and your body are telling you, slow down or have a conversation or say no more or, whatever it may be. And we're just not doing it. And I think one of the most powerful things that people need to be doing in this world that is just full on is just ritualizing being in the present moment. Because if you don't have more time to just stop and reflect and listen, then you're just going to gloss over things that are happening, but also not be aware of what your body and your brain are whispering to you. You're just going to miss it.
God, it's so funny that we're having this conversation because literally, so we're recording this obviously, Marny, it's a Monday. It's just after the Easter break, and I went down to Port Fairy. I've got a Sprinter van, so my husband and I drove down there, and I put my phone in a drawer, and I sat, got my chair out, and I plonked my bum down on this chair. And we were very lucky to have a nice spot where I just looked out onto like this lake and there's all this nature.
Beautiful.
And I sat and I just stared for hours. And I can't tell you how good I feel from doing it. And it's these simple things. And I appreciate we don't all have 2 hours in our day to just sit and stare. But when we are given these opportunities to, I am taking full advantage. You won't catch me on my phone. You won't catch me on my laptop. You won't catch me you'll just see me sitting and staring and just the space and the clarity of thought and everything that comes. But so in our sort of day-to-day lives, right? And you're so right. There is so many, it's really interesting. I want to try and pinpoint certain things that are causing these mental health problems. And I don't think there is just one thing. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. But I think what you're talking about here is really important about becoming present and becoming conscious. Any advice for people that are living really busy lives? They've got maybe a corporate job, they've got a couple of kids, and they don't have a minute. They think they don't have a minute for themselves. How can they find some space and become more present with their thoughts and their emotions throughout the day and throughout the week?
Yeah. And I think you said a key on many of the things that you just said, like one of the key things there is I think they don't have a minute. And I think, and that's a very natural thing to say. I mean, we're all saying we're busy. We don't have time for this. We don't have time for that. But we all have the same kind of, we've all got 24 hours in a day. But you have to be really conscious of what you spend your time doing. Because if you're not conscious about it, you will just be reactive to how you feel. So if we want to start thinking about what we can do, we need to kind of say, okay, what do I need to be proactive with now? Because I have to be serious about this. I have to be conscious. What do I need to do proactively so I turn some of those minutes of my day starting tomorrow into something that will reset, recharge, rejuvenate? And sometimes I'll say to my clients, we need to find time to exercise, because we know, don't we? We know that exercise, we know that sleeping more, we know that hanging out with your friends, all the, lazing and reading a book, we know all of that is good for your mental health. You're going to yoga for an hour. We know all of those things are going to be huge in terms of its impact on our mental health. But sometimes some of my clients who are very busy corporate people, they're just like, oh my God, woman, I've got no time. Like, you're giving me more things to do. How on earth am I going to do that? Plus take kids to school, pick them up, take them all to all their trainings. And And it doesn't have to be like that. You know, it doesn't have to be big hour chunks at all. It could just be the most smallest rituals that can give you moments of rejuvenation and moments of reset. And it's just tweaking some of the choices that you already make during the day. So it might be, making sure that you just eat away, have your lunch away from the computer. Even if you just go outside and sit under a tree for a moment and turn all devices off. It might be little rituals that you do before bed. So put that mobile phone away, so that your brain is actually going into its nice sleep state without notifications pinging and dinging, ringing and people interrupting you. It could be a micro break for 10 minutes in between clients during the day where you put your timer on for 10, 15 minutes and you turn everything off and you just close your eyes for that amount of time. Or walking to get your sushi, outside of the building rather than just whipping downstairs to the cafe attached to your workplace. It's just those little touch points that if you pop into the middle of your day somewhere can make a massive difference.
I completely agree. And look, it's so complicated because I think we've got, like you said at the start, we've got this old brain that hasn't caught up with what our modern world is now. It hasn't caught up with the technology, with the big concrete buildings that we're working in, with the, the corporations that, let's be honest, are more about profit than people, right? So our world, I hate to say it, is almost setting us up to fail and to almost cause us to have these mental health issues. And we have got to take some responsibility, right? And like you just said then, we need to take responsibility, the things that we can do personally. But I think it's also just accepting and surrendering that this is the world that we live in. It's not going to change. And we have to become more aware of how we can navigate it in a lot more calmer and more present manner, because otherwise we're just going to keep on having all of these mental health issues and it's going to get worse.
It is. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are almost waiting. And you probably hear this all the time, like, because we work in organizations with people and with leaders and managers. And I think a lot of people are suffering, and they're suffering in silence, and they're feeling more burnt out or more stressed or more anxious than they've ever had. And I think that people are kind of waiting for their workplaces or the world to actually change. And you could be waiting a very long time for that. And so I think, once you realize that sometimes you have to take that responsibility, once you feel that, it does make you think, okay, no, I can't wait for my boss to put this in place, or my partner to tell me to have a week off so I can spend some time without the kids, or a friend to say, hey, I'll cook your dinners for you this week. Like, you can't wait for that. So what are you going to do? Are you going to keep waiting until your organisation puts all these things in place to prevent burnout? Like, it might not happen. And I know we're getting better, so there is a lot of progress, but change does take time. And I'm sure, in 10, 20, 30 years, workplaces will be more psychologically safe, and have more empathic leaders and have all these wonderful things that aren't happening now. But what am I going to wait for another 10, 20, 30 years? Or am I going to take charge of my life now and start putting these things into my place as though they're as important as a meeting or, a professional development thing that I've got to do, or a client? I need to do that. We need to do it first, don't we? We can't wait for the world to be perfect, because it's we'll be waiting a long time if ever that's going to happen.
I completely agree. And I think that the best thing people can do, the best thing I ever did, was take responsibility. And I think that it was really easy in the beginning when I was going through my anxiety, was to blame my employer. I shouldn't be, this is their fault, the stress they're putting on me. It was the stress I was putting on myself, really. Like, that was where I didn't have the boundaries in place of work. I didn't have a cutoff point. I'd work until late at night. I'd check my emails first thing in the morning. I was doing it all to myself. It was all self-inflicted. And as soon as I realized that and took responsibility, then I kind of regained the power and thought, well, if you got yourself into this position, you can get yourself out of this position. And I read every single book. I wish I had your book, which we're going to go on to talk about now, that I could, on anxiety disorder, on stress management, on personal development, on self-help, on meditation, all the things that I now talk about, all day, every day to anyone who will listen, because it's really made an impact on my life. And I know there are things out there that will help people. You've just got to start doing them and take the first step. But I want to go into your book because, as I said to you at the start, before we jumped on, I saw it in the airport the other day. I was like, oh, that's a book that's needed in our society, because the amount of people, Marny, that I speak to who are burnt out, exhausted. I get this word a lot. I'm exhausted. I'm overwhelmed. I'm stressed. I'm anxious. Like it's crazy. And it's so concerning because it doesn't need to get to that. So can we talk about what burnout actually is and maybe how we get to that point?
Yes. And it's a word that is kind of, I think, it's coming out of the mouths of so many people, isn't it? And I think especially on social media platforms like LinkedIn, you often see it written in the terms of this occupational, as a result of occupational stress. So you see that a lot, don't you, in terms of workplaces. But out in the world, walking the streets or hanging out with your mates, you will see it's a word that is used in all areas, not just, it's more of a descriptive word, isn't it? As in, this is how I'm feeling. So when I wrote this book, I wanted to make sure that I covered just the feeling of it, the utter exhaustion, the utter physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual exhaustion that someone is feeling. And it doesn't matter if it's as a result of occupational stress or not, or is it because, your circumstances in terms of your parenting, or you're a carer, or you're a student going through exams and you're studying every night, you're not sleeping. I don't care why you're feeling like that. I wrote this book because I wanted to talk about the feeling of burnout, because people are feeling burnt out for a variety of reasons, and it is just that utter exhaustion where, and it's such an interesting word because it's almost like it's so hard to describe because it is something else that's more than just feeling chronically stressed. It's that breaking point, isn't it, where you're like, oh my God, the way I'm living my life and what is happening, all these negative emotions I'm feeling, I don't even know how to create what to do next. So it's that mixed bag of feelings that is like, and you're hitting a wall. That's the messy way I would describe burnout.
I think that sadly there will be a lot of people listening to this right now that can relate to that. So how do we go from burnout to brilliant, as the book is titled? I think that's fantastic. But no, it upsets me so much because it's just that chronic stress for so long. We know that causes illness, disease in the body. And, I honestly think people are just going to worry themselves into an early grave. So how can we overcome this burnout? Let's talk about if someone is at the point where they are physically and mentally exhausted, what can they do? What can that person do right now?
Stop. That is the first thing, because when I see clients who are at that point where it's like, boom, I'm burnt out, and it creeps up on you. So there's obviously, how we were talking about before, your body and your mind are whispering things to you all the time, and often we're too busy to notice. So once people get to that burnout point, they've hit that wall, and it's almost like I don't have any energy, I don't have any mental capacity, I've got no oomph left to actually pull myself out and go into the next direction. And even when I was doing more therapy than I do now, I try and work with people who are burnt out to try and get them to design what they want to do next, become more brilliant. But there's almost nothing, there's no energy to even think at that stage. So I always say that first thing is that you need to stop. What can you do to just stop and have some time off? You need to take that time off work. You need to tell the people in your life to take some of those duties off you. What can you do? Just stop, even if it is just a week. Often a week's not enough, but, it's unrealistic for some people to have lengthy amounts of time off, but it needs to happen. That's the first thing. Just stop. I mean, if I told you to just stop, like, what does that even sound to you? You just got to stop.
It sounds scary. It sounds like I'm not going to be in control. It sounds daunting, because I can imagine if somebody has got themselves to that point, and I think I have been on the verge of it, gratefully never dipped into it. If someone told me to stop, my reaction would have been, I can't stop. I've got to keep going. I've got things to do. People rely on me. I've got a mortgage to pay. I've got 2 kids to get to school. I've got to work. I've got to do. There would be so many like pushbacks. I can't stop. So, and I'm sure you've seen that in your practice, right? So let's say somebody that can stop, right? Should they just take, what should they do in that week off where they just go, I am going to go and get signed off from the doctor, offload my kids to my parents or whatever. And what should they do in that week?
Nothing.
Oh God, I'm getting anxious just thinking about it. Okay, so when you say nothing, like you could go on, should they go out and try and get out in nature? Should they, just put some TV on, some trash TV, run themselves a bubble bath? Like what could they be doing?
But this is the thing, is that when people get to that point of burnout, it's almost like you can feel that urge to do. I've got to schedule these things in. So it's almost like you've just got to flop. Do nothing. And to do nothing is sometimes something. So it might be, for some people, it might be, I just need to lay down. I just need to sleep for a week. For some people, it might mean I'm just, not doing my actual work, and I'm just going to hang out at the house. Because it depends what level of burnout as well. Is that if you've got nothing, you just need to sleep, don't you? You just need to lay on the couch. Whereas some people might just want to watch movies or, stream some shows or something, just so that they're just, and that's a good way of relaxing. Others might just want to be outside walking or just spend time in nature, or just have a week off and just do other things, hang out at the shops and things. But I think it's really important that you resist the urge to fill it, because you might, if you're a person that just fills your diary because that's what you've been conditioned to do for many, 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 many years, some of those default ways of operating are just going to make it's not going to heal you from burnout. So when I say stop, I need the energy to come back. I need people to recharge, reset, rejuvenate, relax, and almost get to the point where you're a little bit bored, so that you come into that present moment. And that's where people like myself can work with people, because then you've got the energy back to start redesigning what you want to do next. But if you keep filling it with stuff because that's what you do, then you're not going to get the reset that you probably actually need.
Yeah, that's really, really powerful advice, because again, shows just, what I was saying, like, what could they be doing? And again, it's always like we've got to be in like this constant doing mode, and we just sort of sometimes need to learn just to be. I think that's definitely been a journey for me. And I still, honestly, Marny, I still struggle with it. Like I'm not somebody that likes to feel lazy. I like to be feeling like I'm being productive. And I think though that can be very toxic as well, because then it's like, you can be busy. It's like I definitely used to think that busy was a badge of honor. It wasn't a good week unless I was busy and I was packing my diary out and I had multiple meetings and multiple things going on. And I've learned that actually that's probably when I'm at my least productive, if I'm whacking my diary full of meetings and things, and I get to the end of the week and go, yeah, I've been really busy, but I haven't been productive. And I think people need to maybe sort of understand the difference between being productive and doing a really good job and just being frazzled, overwhelmed and busy for the sake of being busy.
Exactly. And it's interesting, isn't it, how we treat our physical health so differently to our psychological health. Like if we had, say, gastro, I know that's always our favourite condition to get, or even COVID or something like that, with ease we will ring in and say we're not coming into work, wouldn't we? We'd be like, okay, and then we'd flop on the couch, give our body the time it needs to heal, and then we'd get back on with it, wouldn't we? But there's something that stops us when it's psychological, when it's like mental or emotional, is that, yeah, we're feeling a certain way, but we stop and we just push through it. We need to get to a stage where we're listening to, whether it's a physical feeling or whether it's a psychological healing, is listening to what is that and what do I need to do? Do I need to stop and give myself the break that I actually need? I don't think we're there yet.
No, you're so right. And I used to ring up when I was working for a company, I used to ring up my boss and go, put on this sick voice, when actually all I needed was just a day just to like turn my phone off and just be off my emails and just go for a walk in nature. It's interesting actually, because I am very passionate about mental well-being. At my recruitment company, we have days called happiness days. And, they're just 2 days of the year where I don't ask questions. It's just a text message that you need to send, say, hey, Georgie, I'm having my happiness day today. And I'm like, cool, enjoy yourself, do whatever you need to do. No explanation needed. No need to call me up and pretend that you've got a headache and you've got gastro. You just might need a day in bed to binge watch some Netflix. And I think if organizations maybe did a couple of things like that, so people wouldn't have to lie, because then again, when I used to ring up and pretend to be sick, then I'd feel really guilty all day, because I'd be like, and then I'd probably come back feeling even worse, So had I could just ring up my boss and go, I just need a day with myself, with a good book or looking at a tree. I'm not going to be in today. Well, exactly. I think I would have definitely, that would have helped.
Exactly. And it'll be interesting, won't it, in like 10, 20 years, whether we will do that more at ease, really think about, what do I need to be able to perform at my best, and make sure that we are able to, know what that is. And then design our careers around how because that surely, if we know what we all need, and it's quite, in lots of ways, there's the basics that us humans, need to perform at our best, but there's also little subjective things that we know we need. And then be able to communicate that with ease with our employers. It'd be very interesting to see the performance and how that improves in all of us if we're able to kind of go, I need to work these hours and I need to, have regular breaks and I need to do da-da-da. It'd be quite amazing to see. And I think that's where we're headed, but it takes a long time, doesn't it?
Correct. And that's why I'm a very big advocate for the whole hybrid way of working. I think it's good that people work from home now a few days a week. I think that's really good. And I've always been a big advocate for working from home. I used to work from home before hybrid was even a thing. And it just having those extra days just at home to put a load of wash on, so I don't have to spend my weekend catching up on laundry and, just having more time without the 3-hour commute. I've got 3 hours back in my day,
And that's, I think a lot of people really enjoy that hybrid model and are feeling like there's a bit more of a balance in their life, because it's hard to work full time, isn't it, in the office, in the city somewhere, and be able to keep on top of all your tasks and duties at home. It's really, it's impossible for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And on top of that, if they want to get an exercise, if they want to get a run in or a gym session in, they want to meditate, they want to do some sort of something for them. Yeah, it's like that commute. And I know I did it for 5 years, every single day on the train. And during that whole time when if I wanted to get a workout in, I had to get up at 5 a.m. to get in the gym, to get my workout in before work. And then I got into work, caffeinated myself up, sat at my desk, worked through my lunch break, and then went home and did it all again 5 days a week. And I think I look back on that, and I'm grateful for that experience as well, because it definitely did teach me about, resilience and everything else. There's a lot of good lessons in all of that as well. But I definitely didn't have enough time for me. And I do think that my mental health suffered because of that, for sure. But look, I want to talk to you now. So we've discussed burnout and what to do if somebody is completely exhausted and at that stage, just to stop, just to mentally check out, do nothing, lie on the floor, do what we need to do. Let's talk about now how we can be more, preventative. Let's not get to the point where we are completely and utterly exhausted. What are some sort of practices that you recommend, and maybe even some red flags as well, Marny, that people should be looking out for so they don't get to that point of burnout?
Yeah, so I would, really I'm coming back to that self-awareness thing, is know thyself, because I think that's fundamental, isn't it, in all of this, is just have a basic foundation of who you are and what you know you need to function at your best. And that's a really powerful place to start, because then you can start ritualizing that in terms of what you do during the day and what you spend your time doing. So it's having a think of what do I need? And I think, like I said to you before, there's the basics of what human beings need to be doing to function at their best. And we know that is physical activity, don't we? Sleeping. Oh my gosh. Eating well, giving your body the fuel it actually needs. We know we need to be socializing, because we're social creatures, we're pack animals. We need to be playful. We need to be having fun. We need to be doing enjoyable things with no outcome, but just for the enjoyment of it. So those, we need to be aligned with our values and living a life that is, in alignment with who we truly are. We need to have purpose. We need to have meaning. So thinking of those sorts of activities, how do we find moments in the day and ritualize that, at least on a semi-regular basis, and pop it into our diaries as though it is important, because it is, as our big chunks of work that we've got in there. I think that's the first thing we need to do, is look at your diary and kind of go, what am I spending my time doing, and where can I slot in these other things that I know I need? It doesn't have to be every day, but it can be. It needs to be plonked in there.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I have a saying, what doesn't get scheduled doesn't get done. And I think, we schedule when we're going to go to the gym or go for a walk or see a friend, and sometimes you need to do that, because otherwise life does get busy. People book things in your calendar and, then you sort of go, oh, I can't do that now. So it's just being really, I guess, having those boundaries. But you touch upon something there that I think is really, really important. You talked about values. And throughout that sort of period where I was sort of going through my anxiety to sort of rediscover who I was and what was important to me, one thing that I realized that I had lost in this whole process of becoming more anxious was that sort of alignment with my values. And the number one for me is health. I have always prioritized my health, and I wasn't. Number two was growth. And I got to a point in my career where I felt like I was probably just in a bit of Groundhog Day, going through the motions. Nothing was really, didn't feel like I was growing enough. And the third was freedom, but freedom to choose, freedom for choice, freedom to live my life how I sort of want to live my life. And ever since I can remember, since I was a young girl, I always wanted to travel, and I always have had this sort of free-spirited nature. I'm from the UK. I went to live in Greece and France, and I found myself in a corporate job, 9 till 5, but it wasn't just a corporate job. It was a strict, if you weren't in at 9 o'clock, you got dragged into the boardroom. You had to have your lunch break from 1 till 2 so they could monitor how much you had for lunch. And if I left at 5, I was like, where are you going? So I found myself in this environment that was completely conflicted to all of my values. And that's where I think I suddenly found myself in this spiral. I lost who I was for years, to be honest. And I was very, very unhappy, and it led to me being chronically anxious, and potentially I would even say could have got to a point where I was completely burnt out and depressed. So how can people, like, I remember the exercise I did with values, and I sat with it was like loads of words and what was sort of appealing to me. But we talk about values a lot on this podcast, but do you have a practice of how people can understand their values and where they perhaps come from? And are we born with them, and can they change for our life? But love to talk about values a bit more.
Yeah, values are so interesting because we're guided by them in a lot of ways, aren't we? But sometimes we don't even know what they are. And sometimes the values that we've been guided by are not even ours.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then there's something inside of you that just doesn't feel quite right. And that's why in any of my work, I'm always asking people, how do you feel? And I know that's such a token thing for a psychologist to say. How do you feel? Tell me how you feel. But that's powerful, isn't it? Like you were saying, you were just, probably for years going about your business, just doing what you were doing, the same behaviors, because we do that, don't we, outside of our awareness a lot of the time. But there was probably a feeling there. It was probably like an anxiety that was telling you something the whole time, that you were out of alignment. And a lot of us are living our lives, repeating our behaviors every day outside of our own awareness, almost sleepwalking, sounds terrible, sleepwalking through life, and not realizing that you're operating in a way that society is telling you to, or the way your parents told you to. And so this is why that values exercise is so important, is that once you bring those values out of you, of the ones that you've been operating, and look at just lists of words sometimes a great exercise is like just looking at a list of other people's values. Or often I say to my clients, when you're looking at other people, or you're admiring people, or you're inspired by people, or what is it about them? What is there's something about them that's mirroring something that might be deep inside of you that you didn't even that's there, like an inner pilot light type of thing that you just need to bring out and play with a little bit. So I just sometimes had this messy group of words with my clients, and we just kind of talk through them all. And sometimes I'll ask them what their values are, and they'll tell me what they think their values are, but they're actually like a parent that's just been drummed into them, and they actually don't really resonate with that. Now that we're looking at this word and pulling it apart and finding what the meaning of it is, they're like, I've been like operating with this value for like 40 years and it's not even mine. It's actually not as strong as these other things that I see in other people. So it's a really powerful, messy exercise that allows you to bring out what consciously is more important for you. And then you can start thinking about, what can I do in terms of my actions and my behaviors from now on to make me more aligned with my own values in life, not other people's or society's.
It's such a powerful, powerful thing to do, because it also, like you said, it's your compass and it helps you make decisions. So for example, with health being my number one, I always prioritize my mornings. So I could wake up and I do my meditation and I do some form of movement. That's just how I like to start my day. So you will not see me on a meeting or on my phone before 9 o'clock. And if anybody tries to book a meeting now before 9 o'clock, not happening, because I protect that, because I know that that is very important to me. That's my number one value. And then growth, easier for me to make decisions if I feel like I'm just not sort of like reading enough or learning enough. Like I'll go, okay, maybe I need to dive into that. And then freedom, if, I feel like I haven't got as much space in my weeks and my months to go away for the weekend or something, like I go, okay, something needs to give now. But it is your compass, and it enables you to make decisions and then not second guess yourself, because you go, nope, this doesn't align with my value. Easy decision, not booking that meeting at 8 o'clock. Done.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Push it back till 9. It doesn't even need to be a thought in my mind, because that was what was causing the anxiety as well, as I was doing things that were against my values and it was making me unwell. So it's so, so powerful. But I'd love to talk about you personally now, Marny. Like, what do you do daily, weekly? Like, what's made a really good impact in your own life, in your own sort of career, in this whole sort of world of work and life?
Yeah, well, I think what I do practice what I preach, but it did take a long time. So I was working in private practice, like I mentioned, for over a decade. And I actually just sitting all day was not very healthy. So even just that, like a psychologist spend hours and hours and hours a day. You might see 6, 7 clients, 8 clients a day, even sometimes when you're really busy. And I actually found that chunk of my life that I was becoming quite unfit, but also sitting indoors all day it became quite an unhealthy thing. So indoors, but also just sitting, I actually felt that I was becoming quite unhealthy as a result of that. So that plus, really believing in the prevention side of things rather than just the treatment side of things, and also realising that I could actually help more people if I took that preventative kind of angle, actually made me change my career completely. So these days, everything that we've been talking about today, I incorporate into my life now. So I predominantly work from home so that I can make sure that my house, because I'm a sole parent, I've got 2 teenagers. So I've got the dishwasher going some of the time. I've got the robot vacuum. I can have regular breaks. So I'm totally in control of my schedule now. I can get up and down. I can meditate in between clients. So I'm very disciplined. I was going to say strict, but that's not the right word. I'm very disciplined with my rituals in my day so that I can have some sort of balance. I don't normally say work-life balance, but it's the balance that is right for me given my circumstances. So I've designed my life, my personal life and my professional life, exactly around what I know I need to function at my best. And that includes, I think I've got the most walked dog in my city because part of that is that I need that space to think. I need the movement and I need the nature. And, of course, I've got a dog that stares at me if I'm not walking her. And I top and tail my day with that as well because I need the thinking time and I need the movement to perform at my best and be healthy. So that is very, incorporated into my day as well.
I'm smiling because it sounds that you and I have kind of gone a bit of a similar journey, and it's funny, isn't it? Because again, going back to one of my values being freedom, when I could then choose my schedule, which is the power of choice about not booking a meeting before 9 o'clock, and if I needed a break or if I wanted to schedule in, I don't know, like a gym session or a yoga class, and sort of like maybe it's in the middle of the day or in between meetings or a meditation, like I can do it because I've created that. But I think it was a journey, and I think everybody sort of certain people would look at that now and go, that's just not going to be my reality. And I think that all comes back to what we were saying at the start, like, don't be the victim, take responsibility. And there's plenty of organizations out there that, and I know because I recruit for them, that offer that flexibility, that offer that working from home piece, that you can set your life up the way that feels most aligned to you, that you can work when you want to work. Like, I mean, I always say it to the people that I employ, you could work on the moon for all I care. As long as you do your job, I'm not going to be tapping on your shoulder being like, what are you doing? As long as the outcome's there, I don't care. I don't care how you want to work, when you want to work, as long as stuff gets done. Don't care.
Yeah. And the other thing as well is I think, cause, like we've just said, some people are like, yeah, it's all well and good if you've got a career that you can do this and that in between, but some people don't. But then I would just say, just think about that a little bit, because we all have choices, don't we, as well. And once you realise, and some things you might want in life aren't going to come immediately either. So say you're in a job and, you have, put your brave pants on and you've tried to communicate with your employer what you actually need, or you need this amount of hours, and they're saying no. You can sit for the next 10 years, 20 years and work for that person and blame them for the situation because they're unreasonable, because there's plenty of people out there that are unreasonable. And, some workplaces aren't, maybe the role's not conducive to you working certain hours. But there's a point, isn't it, where do you keep banging your head against the wall there? Or is there a point where you have to make a choice and leave, find another job, or start studying, to move it on a different pathway in your role? Like, so some of these choices aren't going to be like that and be a miracle, but it might mean it might steer you in a different direction of you studying to become something else, or doing something else. So so we've got to think about that too. There's choice, and there's choices of what we spend our time doing as well. So, we don't all have to go home every night and watch TV. A lot of people are studying for something else, a better career with that time. So that's why it's important, isn't it, to work with a coach or a psychologist or a counsellor or someone, or talk to a mentor, because sometimes they can put you on a different pathway that is better for you, but it might not be immediate.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And you've just touched upon something that is so true. Like change is the only constant in life as well. And I think when I reflect back on, like, I'm really grateful for my 20s because that was my years of experimentation. And because I had a few different jobs and I worked in a few different organizations for multiple different bosses, I was able to identify, okay, I don't want that. That's what I don't want. Okay, I like that. How can I get more of that? And I'm grateful that I went on that journey and actually had a couple of different careers before I've now founded my own business, because I think that's when you sort of realize like what you want and what you don't want. And then it's kind of like that whole thing of like learning and unlearning. And like you just said, then identify what your skill gaps are. Okay, well, if I want to go into that, I need to study. Maybe instead of coming home and watching, I know, Married at First Sight or some terrible reality TV show, maybe we could take some responsibility and study and learn and grow. And that's what I did, because I knew for a fact I didn't want to work for that company that had me in 9 till 5 days a week, lunch break, monitored. I knew I wanted to get out of there. But I also knew that it was a time in my life where I could learn a lot, because they were a very disciplined and regimented way of working that actually taught me a lot about what it actually takes to kind of get to a point in your career where you are disciplined and you're resilient and you take the action every day. I think it was a very toxic place to work, but I'm also, when I look back, I'm grateful for it as well, because it gave me a lot of discipline. And in those early years in my career was very, very beneficial. So it's interesting, isn't it? But the final sort of point that I want to sort of touch upon is sort of like the working world. And, you know, I think that, again, when I reflect back on that situation that I just said about that really strict and micromanaging, microaggressive bosses, yes, okay, I ended up leaving, but I also did learn so much from that experience as well. And I'm kind of a little bit grateful that I went through it, because it gave me this little bit of like resilience and toughness. Where's the balance in, like, you know, when it comes to leadership, by being too empathetic, almost like, never mind, like, and being a little bit of like discipline and almost like that sort of stuff just needs to get done. Like, I think this is what I'm speaking to anyway. I speak to a lot of leaders and hiring managers and people that struggle with this balance of like wanting to be empathetic, wanting to give their people the autonomy and the trust to just go away and do their job, but then also really struggle to have that sort of tough conversations and actually just say, look, this isn't good enough. And, you know, this needs to change. Any advice? Because I think this can also lead to burnout as well.
I know. And that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah. And this is the thing with managers and leaders, is it's the biggest conversations I think people like ourselves have is it's the people, it's the communication, isn't it? And I mean, gone are the days. Well, there's plenty of leaders out there that are still in that command and control type of mindset. But I certainly grew up with that. I remember being quite scared of my managers. I would never have gone to speak to them at all. They were super scary. But today, I guess, in that kind of leadership space now, we're teaching them to have empathy, aren't we? And make sure that they look after the most important asset in their business, which is their people and things like that. But then, you know, empathy is so important in that process. I spent a lot of time teaching and training managers and leaders in empathy and making sure that they know how to, you know, listen, be active listeners and get the best out of their people and make sure that they hold space for how their people are feeling. But at the same time, there's a sweet spot, there's a Goldilocks position that they need to find, is that the work needs to be done, isn't it? And I think that's one of the most common comments I get is like, yes, that's all well and good, Marny, that I have more empathy and I spend my time talking with my clients about how they're feeling, but I still, there's some KPIs that need to be, you know, ticked off here. How do we make that happen? But I still think it does start with making sure that you are holding space for your people, that you are an empathic leader and you are checking in on your people and making sure that you have those systems in place going forward. And part of that process is gathering the valuable data from those conversations, because that's telling you what the workplace needs for your people to function at their best. So that needs to be an infinite conversation, doesn't it? You as a leader or you as a manager or your people and culture team are making sure that there's various touch points, and that's making sure that culture is there, so that you're gathering and you're constantly adapting over time to what the needs of people are. So it's kind of like that foundation is always there. So when problems do arise, then you can troubleshoot quicker in a more productive way, so that you can find out what is needed for people to be able to perform their job at their best. You know, it's a prevention and a troubleshooting conversation. Then you can find out what the reasonable adjustments are that need to happen.
Absolutely. And active listening is so important. And really, I don't think some people actually know what really listening means. And it's something that I am really working on in my own leadership style. I like not just assuming that I know. And another thing that I find works well is like praise over punishment. And I think that what I think a good leader has done when I've reported into a good leader is they have reinforced the things that I'm doing well. And that's been really motivating for me. It's like, you did really well on that call that just then, Georgie. And, you know, like that was really good the way you said that. And, you know, like what would you do differently next time? And empower. That's what I think we need to do, empower. Whereas one of that toxic workplace I worked for, it was all punishment. It was like you could do 10 things well and one thing wrong, and all they'd focus on was the one thing you did wrong. And it was, again, no wonder why I was anxious. But again, it was just like, again, that didn't work for me, and I don't think it works for anybody. And you're going to lose people that way.
Well, exactly. And I think, there's a big turnaround, isn't there? Like we were saying, you know, the leadership of the past was almost like this top-down approach where it was very command and control. You come and do your job, and, you know, we might check up on you for a performance review where we just pick on the things that you haven't done right rather than the positive things. That's not very motivating at all. Whereas now we need the valuable information from the bottom to be filtered up. And that's valuable data, because you've got people, haven't you, that are existing in the world that's constantly changing, and they're reacting to what's going on in the world, not only what's going on in their lives, but just what's happening in their society or their community or globally. And you need to be able to tap in at some level into how your people are feeling and why they're feeling like that. And then that's how you can have like an evergreen change in your organisation. But you're never going to find that out if you're unkind, if you're not compassionate, and if you don't have any empathy. You're not going to get the valuable data you need about the people and what they actually need. So if you're listening actively, you'll hear the whispers of what people are needing in your workplace. So that's the most valuable data of all, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I know that there'll be a lot of leaders listening to that will completely agree with you there. And I'm also interestingly seeing this rise for more emotional intelligence as opposed to more IQ. And it's shifting, because at the end of the day, with the advancements in technology, a lot of the grunt work now when it comes to technology and things can be done by machines and eventually probably robots. But, you know, the piece that we as human beings can offer so much value on is that EQ and that emotional intelligence and that empathy and that active listening and that communication piece. They're the skills of the future. And I do really encourage everyone on this podcast to really work on that. And again, I think also if you have more emotional intelligence, you'll be more self-aware. You'll be able to identify when you're getting burnt out and prevent that from happening. So it's so important. But final question for you, Marny. So I guess if you could impart one more piece of wisdom onto the listeners today, that just forget about burnout, just want to be brilliant, just want to, you know, just be as the best that they can be every day. Anything in your own life that you've seen work, anything you've advised your patients over the years that you've seen a really big impact on, if you could just sort of give one piece of advice that would really help someone today, what would that be? Big question, I know.
As you can
It could be a habit, it could be a thought, it could be an action. Yeah. Anything that you think would be really beneficial if people actioned it today.
Yeah. I think I would say, we haven't even touched on it really, is observe your thoughts. You know, we talked a lot about self-awareness, but I think that's part of it, isn't it? It's just observe the chitter-chatter that's going on in your mind because that's valuable information that's telling you what the next step is. So it might be telling you to slow down. It might tell you that you need to communicate with someone. It might be telling you to stop, or it might be telling you, I can't navigate this chitter-chatter at all and I need to get some help. So I would say don't just fuse with whatever's in your head. Observe what it is, and that's valuable information about which direction is next for you.
Amazing. And on that note, where can I send people who want to find more about yourself, get your book? Where do you hang out the most?
Oh, where do I hang out the most? Well, I've got my website, which is marnylishman.com.au, but I hang out on all the social media. So I try and be a cool kid on there, but don't know if I'm successful being a cool kid. But I'm on Instagram and I'm on LinkedIn. So I spend a lot of my time on there. Writing my own content or curating other people's content that aligns with what I'm talking about with my clients. And of course my book is on the bookshelves of most good bookstores.
Yeah, no, and we'll make sure that we put all of the links below just so everyone can go and grab your book, which I highly recommend everyone goes and reads. And make sure that you connect to Marny. You've been an incredible guest, Marny. I feel like I've learned so much today as well. It's been such a fantastic conversation. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And I look forward to following your work. And the world needs all of the information that you're spreading right now, because unfortunately, society is getting a bit more complex. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an honor, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the future.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.